If you price per word, does that encourage you to be wordy as a writer? Does it encourage you to write more? And does it encourage you to charge more to your clients? And I think this is a really interesting concept that one of the people who subscribed to my newsletter brought to me. So she got my pricing guide. And if you go to mandyellis.com/pricing guide, you can get it too. It's free. I just did a massive update of it. So it includes all these different types of projects now, like a lot more than it used to, and a lot of strategy, content strategy, and consultative type projects. So if you go to mandyellis.com/pricing guide, you can get it for free. And then you'll sign up for my weekly email, so you get even more tips and tricks. And this was someone who signed up, and she was like, hey, I got your guide, and I thought, it's weird that you're doing a lot of per word pricing in here. And I was like, I guess I didn't think about it that way. And she thought, doesn't pricing per word encourage people to be wordy? Doesn't pricing per word, hey Marie, welcome in. Doesn't pricing per word encourage wordiness? Doesn't it encourage writers to write more so they get paid more? And I thought, what an interesting way to think about this pricing guide. And I guess for me, I've been doing it for so long, right? And this is the first thing we're going to talk about. So the first thing we're going to talk about, we also have a question today. So we're going to go over that. But I got to find my number. So number one, the first thing I was thinking of was, I normally price per word. It's just from partially coming from magazines. It's more, I guess for me, it feels more accurate. Because I know how many words are in it. I know if I'm doing interviews or research. I know if I have to do a bunch of SEO stuff. I know if I have to go find images, or if I have to go find a bunch of links, or if I have to do a bunch of edits. Like I know a bunch more stuff. And so pricing per word, I know kind of the value of that a little bit better. But then I kind of realized that one of the reasons, and this is what I told her, one of the reasons that I started pricing per word and why it makes the most sense for writers is because almost all of our assignments, like the majority of our assignments, are by the word, right? And this was someone who was just beginning in freelance writing, so they hadn't had a bunch of assignments and wasn't used to the conversation with their clients. But yeah, like most of the time, almost every time you get an assignment, it's, hey, this blog post is 800 to 1,000 words. Or, we need to make sure that this this reported article is 1,200 words, or that this ebook is this many words. And sometimes, like for me, I like to do page counts for certain things. So ebooks and case studies and white papers, I usually do by page count, but some people even do word counts for those. Almost everything that you do, like marketing materials or brochures or press releases or like landing pages or sales pages, or when you do web content, when you fix a website, almost everything is by the word. And that to me just means it's more accurate to do it by the word, but you don't give your clients necessarily a per word rate every single time. Like sometimes I give them a per word rate when it applies, but a lot of times I just work that into how I calculate pricing because I know the value of that a lot more. So for example, if someone's talking about, an 800 to 1,000 word article and it needs 4 interviews and all this stuff, then I say like, okay, it's $1,000. I would go to them and say like, it's $1 a word because I know that this article with all these interviews isn't going to be 800 words. I know it's going to be 1,000 words. Hey, Vicky, I always like the wave. So then you kind of know from going through this process, right, that that article wouldn't be 800, it would be 1,000. And that internally on your side to calculate the pricing that you're charging about $1 a word, but you're presenting your clients with a project price. And I always feel like that's easier anyways, to just give them a project price. And so for me, I think the per word pricing is more about the calculation part and knowing the value part, and then being able to translate it to a bunch of different industries. So when we're kind of thinking about why per word makes the most sense, I just feel like it translates across businesses and magazines and publications and all these different types, and agencies and all these different types of clients that you would work for. So when I put it in my pricing guide, I thought that would just be the most widely accepted way. I also find for me, it's just easier to do the math. Like I am have a really hard time sometimes with like, I'm really good at accounting math. I'm really good at dealing with money and handling finances. I'm good at like that kind of math. When people are like, you should multiply it by this percentage and then do this other thing, like my brain starts to melt. So if I ever have a client that's like, please do the math of all these percentages for this thing, I'm like, oh no, because it's like, that's not, I'm not a math person. I'm a writer. Like I'm really good at accounting. So for me to do the basic math of per word, it gives me a lot more, it gives me a lot less stress, and it makes it a lot easier for me to just calculate it. I'm like, I know how many words this thing is. So we're going to do 3 2,000 word articles, or we're going to do 4 blog posts a month at 800 to 1,000 words. That's this many, words. So it's $1 a word, or it's whatever it is times 4. Like I could do that basic math. And then I say, hey, in order to work together, this is $3,000 a month or $4,000 a month, or, it's 50% upfront and 50% 30 days later, depending on the project. But I feel like it makes it super simple for me to see the value, because then I can say like, well, this blog post doesn't need a bunch of interviews, or it doesn't, it only needs one study. So I don't really have to spend a ton of time doing research. So it's not going to be as hefty of a price tag as something that would have a lot of research or interviews. And that I can easily scale that back with a per word pricing, rather than saying like, for me, I guess sometimes it's hard to visualize like, okay, this thing is $1,000. Well, I think this other thing should be $600. And I just like per word. It's like a number that I can easily multiply. Hey, Woo. My Woo's over here. My Woo dog. Hi, Woo dog. I'm still hoping your scar goes away from your incident. So for me, I guess when I price per word, I feel like it's more accurate, it's more valuable, it makes more sense, and it applies to so many industries, and it's easier to do the math. I also feel like if you need to make an adjustment, like let's say someone comes back and says, all right, your $1,000 price tag is a little too high. Could you do it for $900, or could you do it for $800 an article? And then you're like, okay, well, I know based on my history that this article probably won't be 800 words. It'll probably be 1,000, because I have to do all of these interviews. Hi, Woo. Hi, Woo. And so that basically when you take less money, then you're getting less per word. Hey, Carol, welcome in. So that you're getting less per word that way, and then you're like, but what is it? What's the new number, right? So if it's 1,000, it's 1,000 words, right? Is 80 cents a word or whatever. So even now the mental math is hard for me, but that kind of thing makes it apparent to me that it's a big drop, like $1 to 80 cents a word. And to me, that's a bigger drop than 800 from 1,000. So if someone says like, oh, it's only $200 less, but then I'm like, no, it's like 80 cents a word, or it's like this many, this much of a drop. Every time I type a word, I'm losing 20 cents, or every time I type a word, I'm losing 50 cents or whatever. Like that feels a lot more impactful than $200, because there's a lot of things that we do in life, right? Like you buy groceries and it's really expensive, and you're like, man, it was an extra $100, and that's a lot. Like it depends on the context sometimes, and it also depends on like what you're kind of doing. So for me, when I think about every time I type a word that I'm losing money, that's a problem. So for me, that's an interesting thing to talk about when it comes to wordiness. So when it comes to wordiness, one of the things that I think is helpful, and let's talk about this as number 2. So let's move on to number 2 here. So in number 2, if I'm losing 20 cents every time I type, so let's say instead of $1 a word, I'm now getting 80 cents a word, right? So I'm losing 20 cents every single time I type, every single time I'm writing in here. Wouldn't that encourage me to be wordy? Wouldn't it encourage me to charge my clients more? And the answer really is no on it's multiple planes. So the first plane is you already have a word count. This thing is 800 to 1,000 words, and you need to write to the word count. You don't turn in something that's 2,000 words to someone and say, good luck. Now, there's sometimes when you're creating certain things, like for me, sometimes when I'm creating web copy, like website copy, I know that if I write more, that helps with SEO. So if I'm having a hard time cutting things, or if I need to add some sections because my client asked for sections, I know that web copy is going to get better. But an article, like most of the time, that needs to stick pretty close to the word count. So number 1, you've already agreed on a word count. So it wouldn't encourage wordiness, because you got to stick to the word count, right? Here you go, buddy. We're going to see if you can catch it. We can take votes on whether or not he'll catch it. Oops. All right, buddy, ready? 1, 2, 3, dog. So close. It's to your left. The other left. The other left. It's over there, buddy. It's over there in the corner. Hold on. Bear assistance. We need to do some bear assistance. Here you go, bud. Here you go. There we go. Charles, go to your hobble hole. Go to your hobble hole. Over here trying to bug me for snacks. Snacks. Ooh, careful. Other one. Other one. There you go. Oh, close enough. All right, buddy, let's try one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3, dog. Oh, so close. But this time it landed on your paw, so you got it. Good job. So, number one, it wouldn't encourage wordiness because you already have a word count, right? Someone already told you 800 to 1,000 words, and you need to stick to that. And like I said, there are some exceptions, and there are times when you can go over, but most of the time, if you're dealing in articles, you need to stick as close as possible to that. And then you also have flexibility with your clients. So as you kind of work, sorry, got dog hair on my face now. As you work with your clients, you end up learning like who can you stretch and who can you not, right? But you're not really charging by the word. You've already given them a project price. So they're not going to pay any more if you write 1,400 instead of 1,200 words because you agreed already in your contract, right? Because you have a contract that it is 800 to 1,000 words or whatever it is. And let's say like I've done this in the past where I have had more freedom. Like my clients give me more freedom to say like, hey, if it turns out the article is a little longer, you know, a few hundred words longer, that's cool. I'm not charging them anything more. I'm just not cutting as much as I normally would. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that it's not encouraging wordiness because you're literally not going to them and saying like, it's the final draft was 1273. You owe me for 1273. It's always a whole number, right? It's like 1,000 words or 1,200 words. So, hey, Vesna, welcome in. So you're not going in there and giving them a random number. And this is for new freelancers. So if you're a new freelancer, this is for you. You will never I don't think I've ever submitted a literal word count where I was like, yeah, it's 1273 or it's 855 or whatever. Like it's always a whole number. It's because hitting that actual number is really, really difficult. Like, yeah, normally if it's an 800 to 1,000 word article, that's why you have a 200 word buffer, right? So it's not encouraging wordiness and it's not encouraging you to be more, to charge more because you've already settled on a fee, right? When you sign a contract with a magazine or you sign a contract with a client, the fee is in there. Like, you owe me this money. Here's what it is. You don't do the work and then invoice for the number of things you did. Like, you set up a contract and the contract says, cool, you're going to write this 800 word article for $500, sign on the dotted line. That's usually for magazines. And then for businesses, hey, Getty, welcome in. And then for businesses, a lot of times what ends up happening is you have the same thing. You have a contract and you said, yeah, the thing's 800 to 1,000 words. We're doing 3 of them. The total cost of that, is $3,000 or whatever. And you owe it to me 50% up front, 50% 30 days later, or you owe it to me however it works out. But the agreed upon number is always there, right? The agreed upon amount of what you're getting paid is always there. So the actual word count doesn't apply at all. It's just really applying to your editing. You have to make sure that you're editing your content so that it fits within the word count, right? And I thought that was so interesting to think about that. I thought that was so interesting to think about. I hear you, Woo. I hear you, excuse me, wooing over there. I hear you being wooish. Can you lay down? She's like, not until I get something. I thought that's such an interesting concept because even when, oh, my goodness, we're sassy today. You scared me. You surprised me. So even when I was starting out, I think it was because, ready, buddy? 1, 2, 3, dog. Good job. Oh, you caught it and I didn't get it on camera. So even when I was starting out, and maybe this is because I had a journalistic style internship, like they give you a word count, right? Good job. Oh, I caught it again and I missed it on camera. I always had a word count, right? You give it a word count for an article. And the worst thing is like when you get a paper, like, and someone's like, it has to be however many pages for your college paper, which is dumb because no one really writes in pages. Like most of the projects we do are not in pages. Very, like some of them are, but most of them are by the word. So even doing a paper in college used to be by the word. But in any case, for me, I never thought about invoicing someone for 857 instead of 800. Or I never thought about invoicing someone for 1575 when the article was supposed to be 1,000. You know, like there's this gap, I think, and that's a weird thing to think about for me, that that would be an idea, right? Like people would be like, well, it's just the word count. I just charge for the word count because it's per word. That would mean that you didn't have an agreement in place and they were just like, charge whatever it costs, like that you didn't come to any kind of agreement, right? And I think that's important for setting expectations. So let's talk about number 3. We're going to do a pup date, but then we're going to talk about number 3. Oops. And it would help if I got rid of number 2. So let's do a quick pup date because I've got a woo machine over here. Woo machine, you got to go back to your hobble hole. Go back to your hobble hole. Go back to your hobble hole. All right, buddy. Ready? 1, 2, 3, dog. Oh, man. We were doing so well. Ready? You're much better at catching things. Bo's never been great at catching things. That's not one of his dog strengths. Did you find it, buddy? It's in the corner. Oh, Charlotte. You're having an off day. All right, hold on. We got Treato assistance. Woo, woo, woo. Treato assistance coming. It's over here, buddy. Ugh. All right, Charlotte, can you lay down? You lay down? Down? No, down. Down. She's like, I'll just give you my paw. I'll give you my paw. Charlotte, you have a Treato right in front of you. You're going to step on it. There you go. All right, buddy, ready? 1, 2, 3, dog. Oh, so close. It's on the other side. Let's see if you can find it. I can see it on camera. You covered it up. Will you find it? You covered it with the blanket, buddy. High five. Girl. Other one. Good job. All right, buddy, let me help you. Hold on. All right. Think we're good. All right, B. Can you go to your hobble hole? Back up. Come here. Can you go to your hobble hole? You lay down. Lay down. All right. I'll make you into a blanketed friend. Come here, Minnie. Come here, Minnie. Come here, Minnie. To your hobble hole. Go to your hobble hole. No, you gotta go to your hobble hole. Good job. Okay. Oh. Nope, you can't bug me over here, or you're gonna be removed from the live stream, Minnie. Okay, let's talk about number 3. Let's talk about all of our stuff. Hi. You being a woo machine today? I know. Let's talk about number 3. Does anyone remember what I was saying for number 3? So let's talk about this. So when you're pricing per word, right, you're already agreeing on all these different things. You're already, oh, Bo, you okay, buddy? You're already agreeing on a bunch of different things. So when you kind of start out pricing per word, you are always in agreement with everything. There's always a bunch of things that you're agreeing on for your pricing per word. So everything, before you ever type a sentence, everything should already be agreed upon. So it shouldn't be this magical thing where you just like go off and write and then submit a random invoice. Like everything is already organized before you ever submit your article, right? You can send a proposal, then a contract, and an initial invoice, or, you know, if it's a magazine or other type of thing, you invoice after. But everything's already agreed. So when we're kind of working on per word pricing, I have notes over here. That's what I keep looking at, is I want to make sure we hit all these notes. So for me, pricing per word is also in your benefit. So let's talk about that too. And if anybody remembers what I was saying for number 3, there was a good thought there, and now I've lost it because I was futzing around with these furs. So I'm going to move on to a different one. So per word pricing is also in your benefit. So per word pricing is in your benefit because it prevents you, right, from being wordy, right? Because you already have a word count. You already have something to stick to. You don't just randomly turn in a ton of stuff, right? You don't just randomly, you're like, this is 8,000 words. And they're like, what? It's supposed to be 800. So there's that. And then the other thing is that I think per word pricing, you usually end up getting paid better, like the value of your work, and you get paid better for that work. So when you calculate things per price, and you're always giving your client a per project price. So those are two different things. So what's really important is that you may calculate by the word to figure out what's going on and what to charge, but your clients are always seeing a per project price. Like they're always seeing, 4 blog posts a month at this amount, or they're always seeing like, hi Woo. They're always seeing like that bulk number. So when you're kind of pricing like that, it's easier to up your rates because you see the better value in that. It's easier for you to do calculations. I feel like you make more money because instead of writing a ton, right? Instead of overwriting and being like, I have to have all this stuff, you cut it down to the things that are most important, right? You have to stick to the word count. So when you stick to the word count, you end up most of the time cutting all the stuff that you really don't need. Like that's the thing that's really important. And for me, I think that helps you to learn to not only edit your work, but find the pieces that are most valuable. And now your work is even more valuable because it's not just 1,000 random words. It's 1,000 of the right words in the right order, delivering the right message at the right time. That's really important. So a lot of times writers get into this wordiness trap because they're like, I have to have it. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have to have it. Now, every once in a while, there is a time where you might need to have it. And if you have a flexible client, do it and be like, yeah, I need these extra 300 words. And they're like, cool. But now you took her seat. You have to go back over to your hobbit hole. You're just going to sit here. Go back to your hobbit hole. The other hobbit hole. Here you go. Here you go, buddy. You have to kind of learn this really important principle of writing, which is like the flexible clients are great because you get to include extra stuff that you want to include. But most of the time, like especially if you're writing for magazines, they only have so much space. The thing is printed, right? So there's only so much space. It's not like the internet where they're like, yeah, an extra 200 words isn't a big deal. You're not going to get paid for them, but you can write them. So you kind of have to learn that process. And I think for me, that helped me cut down on being wordy because I only had so much space to work in. Plus, if you're pricing by the word, right, then you already have agreed on a price. So the more you write, the less you technically get paid, right? So if you write 1,200 words and you're getting paid $800, right, instead of 800 to 1,000 words, now you're getting paid less. So for me, when I think about it that way, it motivates you to write less. And I think that for me, there's a reason why a lot of articles, like, yes, there's SEO, right? They're like, oh my gosh, longer articles are better, 1,000 to 2,000 words, or we need pillar pages or whatever. And that is all very important. But there's also a big thing like where once you write a bunch of articles or you write a bunch of blog posts or you do a lot of writing projects, you start learning that the reason 1,000 words or 1,500 words works is because that's really what you need to hone in sharply on one topic. It's not a book, right? It's not a book. It's not an anthology. It's not like a continuing story series. Like it's this one snapshot. And this is kind of how I think about it. Is like this prevents me from being wordy because it's just one snapshot. I could take 20 snapshots of the same topic and they would all be very different, but it's just one snapshot. So I can't include everything in there. And I can't, be crazy with my word count. I just have to do one snapshot. The other thing that's really interesting, and I think this is something that a lot of writers end up kind of realizing late in the game, is they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get paid all this money to write to write 3,000 word articles. They want long form copy. Then when they start putting that together, they're like, oh crap, that's actually really hard to do. And here's why. When you're writing this long form copy, to keep your audience's attention for 3,000 words is really tough. It's not a story. It's not a book. There's a beginning and an end in 3,000 words, and keeping it interesting and keeping your transitions between different sections to have people, keep reading, that's really tough to do. It has to be interesting content all the way through. And there's a lot of times, and I've seen this in writing, where people are like, oh, well, the article needs to be 2,000 words. And you can go through it and be like, you don't need this, you don't need this, you don't need this. It's just that they haven't honed their critical eye. So when you're thinking about this stuff, for me, that's kind of the thing that's really important. That's why an article that's 2,000 or 3,000 words and pricing by the word makes sense, because it's really hard to write those. And most of the time you end up with a lot more material. Like for me, it's like I end up with 10 times the material that the article actually is. So if like the article is like 1,000 words, I end up with 10,000 words of notes, depending on like interviews and research and notes I've taken and all this stuff. Like I end up with pages and pages and pages of notes. It's like how I do my work. So it's not that all of those 10,000 words of notes are valuable. They're not. It's that you have to compile the most important things. And compiling the most important things from 2,000 words or 3,000 words isn't that you just get to include all this stuff. It's that you're actually covering a lot in that one. And most of the time it's a guide. It's not like one topic. It's actually multiple topics in one article. And that makes it way tougher to write and way tougher to keep the audience's attention and way tougher to just put everything together. So Carol says, so I hope that makes sense. If something has a higher value, like sales copy, or requires research, you charge a higher per word cost. Yes, absolutely, 100%, Carol, because it has a higher value. And this is something that I think is really important for people to recognize. And this was something I just talked about on Ed Gandia's podcast. So that I think just went live. I need to go double check, but I just talked about this on Ed Gandia's podcast. So if you're writing something as a higher value, it's not just the word count. This is about like what the ripple effect is. So that means when you write sales copy, a lot of times they keep that for a very long time. And like, let's say you wrote a landing page, like a big juicy landing page that's supposed to be for sales, right? And that thing is 2,000 words. Okay. And they pay you, somewhere like they pay you, I don't know. Let's just make the math easy. $1 a word. You should probably do a little more for sales pages, but like $2 a word or something. But let's say it's $1 a word. So they pay you $2,000 for this sales page, and then they're getting sales from that. So the $2,000 is really small compared to all the sales that they get. So you need to charge very well because you're helping them make more money. That's really important. Plus, whatever you create for them, especially if it has to do with sales, that reverberates for a long time. And Ed Gandia and I talked about this. We've both had content that people use internally. So like, one of the things that's really important is people use it as onboarding. Hey, new writers, we don't work with Mandy anymore, for what, I don't know. But here's her work as an example for you to create new copy. Or here are our 4 best performing blog posts. Mandy wrote them. She's still working for us, but here's 4 of our best performing blog posts. Please use those as an example. Or they put it in their onboarding material for new employees, or they put it in their contracts or their sales materials for new clients. Like the thing that you write reverberates out. People, they own it, right? So they can use it in 10,000 different ways, and you get paid one time for that thing. So if you're using something that's high value, and the other high value thing besides landing pages are things like white papers and case studies, because case studies, right, and white papers are kind of like, they're like really big testimonials almost. Like white papers a little bit different. Case studies are more like giant testimonials, but those things are used all the time to make sales and used all the time to educate people on the product, like new employees on the product or the service, or to help people understand, or to get leads, or to do a whole bunch of different things. So basically it's like that thing does a lot of different jobs. It's almost like, okay, here's a good example. And we're going to use horses because I think this makes sense. If you were to buy a donkey and a Clydesdale, right? Your donkey can only do so many things, right? Your donkey is small and it can only do so much, right? Otherwise it's animal abuse, and let's not do that. So the deal is like your donkey can only do so much, but your Clydesdale, which you're definitely going to pay a lot more for a number of reasons, can do 800 different jobs because the thing is a beast. It's huge, right? So instead of the donkey, right, you're like, all right, donkey, you can do 5 jobs. And my donkey didn't cost a ton because the donkey can only do 5 jobs. The Clydesdale can do 25 jobs. That's why it costs more. That's kind of the idea here. If you were doing something for sales and marketing, like that is going to get repeated, that's why you charge more. It's because you're creating a Clydesdale, not a donkey, right? Does this make sense? I hope this is making sense. But that's the thing is if it's lots of interviews or lots of research, that's why I always put that in the pricing guide. Let me pop that up. We haven't mentioned that in a little bit. So that's why I put that in the pricing guide, is like the prices here in this free pricing guide, mandyellis.com/pricing guide. I say it depends on complexity, research, interviews, SEO stuff, etc. Because that's how I grade my work. If you, I'm going to pop this back in. So if you end up having something like a blog post is not just a blog post. Like I've had blog posts that are like the same, like it's called a blog post on their end, but it's the same thing I would write for a magazine, like 100%. I have to interview 4 people. I have to go find 3 studies, or I have to go find a bunch of data that supports this theory throughout the whole thing. So I need like 8 to 10 data points. And that is a lot more than 800 words of like one profile, or 800 words of just like a basic blog post of like, 5 hardwoods to consider for your floors or whatever. Like those are way different. So every time you look at that work, you need to look at the complexity of that work, and you need to look at the value of that work. This was something that I talked about with Ed Gandia. The value of your work is so much more than writers know. Like it's not just one thing. And even if it is, even if you just have one blog post for this client, it lives on their website for forever, almost. Like, so they might delete it someday, but it lives on there for almost forever, and it continues to drive traffic and audience and all these other things to them. So they only paid for it once. I hear you, Woo. They only paid for it once, but that thing is still doing all the good work for them, so you need to charge more for that. I hear you, Woo, and I understand your issues. All right, Carol. Carol, are you trying to stump me today? If you feel like this has been helpful so far, give it a thumbs up. If you feel like you want to learn more about a high-earning freelance writing business, subscribe. Okay, Carol says, so rather than guesstimating how long an assignment will take and multiplying that by your internal hourly rate, you charge by the word, and the rate depends on the value of the project. You got it, Carol. Spin the prize wheel. Yes, you get $200 for pass and go. I don't... I have said this many times. I don't know my internal hourly rate. Like I do sometimes, but very rarely. I'm not good at paying attention to how many hours I spend on stuff. Like I can guesstimate it, and I'm like, this draft could take 2 to 4 hours, or writing this garbage draft could take 6 hours or 8 hours. Like and I sometimes am like, well, editing will take me 1 hour to 2 hours, and it could take 4 hours. Like I'm not good at that thing. So for me, I don't guess how long something will take and charge for that, because I'm not good at it, and I don't think it's actually accurate. The time is not the value. This is really important, so pay attention. Time is not your measure of value. Nobody cares how much time it takes. What really matters is the value of that piece of content to your clients. How long will that thing live? Will it be a mastodon? Will it be a dinosaur? Will it live for a long time? Will it get them a bunch of money and sales and clicks and shares and thought leadership points and whatever? You need to charge more for that. That is totally more important. Nobody cares. Now, like nobody cares how much time it takes. I hope this is like a really important thing. This is something that a lot of freelance writers make a big mistake over. They're like, oh my gosh, it took me 2 hours, so I should charge less. No. Someone's going to pay you one time. And this is why people like Ray Edwards work on royalties, right? So when Ray Edwards writes a sales page, I hear you, Woo. When Ray Edwards writes a sales page for Tony Robbins, he's like, cool, that cost $1 billion. No, he's like, this costs, however much it costs. I don't know how much his sales pages cost off the top of my head, but he gets X% of royalties from the sales from that sales page. That's why he does it. The value is not in the one-time transaction of paying Ray Edwards $30,000 or whatever it is. I don't know the number. I'm making it up. $30,000 to write a sales page. The value is that Ray's work converts, and he should be paid well for that. So they pay him $30,000 to write a sales page that they know will do well, and then they reward him, like his contract says that he gets royalties, right? With percentages of the sales that come in. That's value. Nobody cares that it took Ray 1 hour to write that sales page, which it didn't. It probably took him multiple weeks. We're just guessing, but no one cares. Tony Robbins is not going to come down from the stage and be like, Ray Edwards, did it take you 4 hours or 15 hours? You should charge us less money because it took you less time, even though I'm going to make bajillions of dollars off the sales page. Nobody cares. So for me, why would I use a guesstimate of how long it takes? Because I have no idea. And a lot of people do this. Like some people are like, it's 2 to 4 hours. Even people, like I've been writing for 10 years. I know, Woo. I've been writing for 10 years and I still, like, that's not one of my strengths. Some people are like, oh, I know it'll take me this amount of time, but it's always a range. Nobody comes to me. I've never met a writer that comes to me and says everything, this thing takes 3.5 hours every time. I'm not tired at all. It doesn't take me 6 hours sometimes because I'm burned out and overworked. Like no one does that. No one comes in and says like, a blog post is 2 hours, but like they say things like, I can get a blog post done in as little as an hour. That doesn't mean it always takes an hour. I can do this in as little as 4 hours, but it doesn't mean it always takes that time. So the guesstimate is the wrong function for that equation. You need to focus on value of the project. Will that thing live for a long time? This is why, and I saw this, here you go, buddy. Oh, you caught it. I keep missing the ones on camera. I saw a study recently where people polled high-earning freelance writers. They were polling 6-figure writers, and the average per word rate was $1 a word or more. So most 6-figure freelancers, I don't remember where this was. I saw it on LinkedIn. So if you want to go find it on LinkedIn and send me the link and I'll share it here, let me know. But they were making $1 a word or more because they know the value of that content. They know that when they charge $1 a word, they know the ripple effect of that thing. They know the value they're bringing to the project, the knowledge, the niche expertise. They've done that thing a bunch of times, and they understand that when they hand that over and they get paid $1,000 or they get paid $2,000 or $5,000 or $30,000, that what they're giving them informs so much more of the whole sales and marketing process that it's worth it to pay that one-time fee to then use it over and over again. So I'm glad that you asked this, Carol, because this is a really important thing. I don't charge by the word, like, and just to clear, did you get it? Did you find it? Here you go. We have a little dementia situation. So the other thing is, like, just to be clear, I charge per word on the back end. So I will say, based on my experience, based on the value of this thing to my client, based on the things I know about all of these projects, this should be $1 a word. I tell my clients, okay, it's $1,000. So on my back end, in my own private little office space in here in the headquarters, that's what we call it. It's actually a very small room, so don't feel like it's fancy. This is actually a closet right behind them. So I say, okay, this client wants me to write an article, right? Like this is the example I always use is like they want 3 interviews and 2 studies, or they want 3 interviews and some research to support the points as I go along, right? So then I'm like, all right, I already know from past experience, or I already know that the quality of my work and what I'm turning in is like at least 80 cents, if not typically $1 a word. This is complex. They're asking me to do extra stuff. Maybe I'll charge $1.50 a word. Most of the time I don't, but unless it's really complicated. But then I know that the value of that thing, right? I know that they're saying it's a 1,000-word article. I know the specs of that scope of work. I always ask this before I price anything. And then I'm like, all right, so $1 a word makes sense. It's $1,000. I'm doing 4 of these articles a month. So I tell my client it's $4,000 a month. That bulk price is easier for their brains anyways to kind of, go around. Because if you go to them and say like, it's $1 a word, you calculate it. That's a pain in the butt. Don't do that. So I always, on my back end, calculate by the word because that's what makes sense to me. I think time is the wrong thing. Time to me is the old, outdated 9-to-5 job thing where that's not actually the value. That's not the difference. Like someone can be doing a great job at their full-time job, right? And we all know there are people who excel who make $40,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 a year. People who do great work, right? They're still getting paid for time even though they're doing great work. So getting paid for time does not incentivize people to do a better job, right? Most of the time. The idea that I would guess how much it would take and multiply that by my internal hourly rate, right? To me, that's not the point. Like my internal hourly rate, if I'm like, I would like to make $200 an hour and it'll take me 3 hours to write this article, I should get paid $600 when that article is not, right? Like, so let's think about it. That's another good example. And I'm glad we're talking about this. This is really important. So the deal is that when you are, let's say you're Carol, and Carol, I know Carol. So I know she has a bunch of experience. I know that Carol is a smart cookie, right? So if Carol came to me and said, okay, cool, I know that this blog post, between everything that I want to do, right? And I'll give you 2 examples. Here's one. Everything in this blog post, I know I want to make $200 an hour, and I know that this blog post will take me 3 hours to put together, right? So now I'm at $600. You should not be getting paid $600, Carol. I know, excuse me, that's way too low. And let's say this, this article is 1,000 words. We'll use the same number. Carol should not be getting paid $600 just because it took her X amount of time to do it. She should be getting paid $800 because Carol's a rock star and she gives people results and she does a good job and her content is amazing and the value of that thing to her client is way higher than $600. That's nuts. Here's another example. Now, this is more of the Mandy example than the Carol example. So the Mandy example is that I'm like, I want to make $200. So between doing, and let's just calculate this out. So between doing interviews, and those interviews can be 30 minutes to an hour. So let's just say 30 minutes. So that takes me 2 hours. So I'm already up to $400 just by doing the interviews. I haven't done any research. And this is a 1,000-word article. Now I need to go do research, and my research takes me another 2 hours. So that's another $400. Now I'm up to $800 and I haven't written a damn word. Okay. I'm up to $800 and correct my math if I'm wrong. Which we all know I'm not good at fast math. I know, Woo. I hear you. So now I'm up to $800 and I haven't done anything. Now it takes me another 2 hours to compile my notes and transcripts and research and put it all into one document because that's how I write. I write all in one document. I put all my garbage, all my everything into one doc, and then I write through all my notes. This is just how my brain works. So now I'm at $1,000, right? Another 2 hours. Wait a minute. What was I at before? I'm either, hold on. So that was 2 hours. That's $400. Like, and then it was whatever I said, $600. No, that's $800. Oh yeah, I was at $800. So now I'm over $1,000. Here you go, buddy. Now I'm over $1,000 and all I did was do the interviews, do the research, and put my notes in there. Okay, so if I'm going by time and I haven't written a goddamn thing, I'm in trouble. So if I was worrying about all that stuff, and that takes time, we all know interviews, researching, putting your notes together, organizing before you ever write your garbage draft, that's critical to actually creating really great copy. You need really great interviews, which means you need to write very good questions. I didn't even factor that into the math, that I had to write all these interview questions and set up the interviews and set up my calendar stuff. And then get people on the phone and then run the transcripts. And like, I didn't even do that. I just calculated for interview time, right? So now I'm over $1,000. Let's say it takes me, I have a lot of notes from all these interviews and from all the research, and it takes me another 4 hours to write my draft. So let's just say I'm at 1,200. Now I'm at 1,600. And then I have to edit the thing, and it takes me another 2 hours to edit it. So now I'm at $2,000, and now I'm getting paid 50% of the amount of time I've spent on it. And that nobody cares. If you go to your client and you're like, hey, I spent 50% more time on this, they're gonna be like, I don't give a shit. Like, what I want is the thing that you have. I want that article. They don't care. Like that's the thing that I think is a mistake when you're coming from the corporate world. There's no one, like in the corporate world in a 9-to-5, and this is what I have found with students and my own stuff, is that people care about time. They're like, how much time did it take you? Why are you wasting so much time? Why are you late? Why are you early? Why are you doing this? How much time was your lunch break? How much time is that meeting? How much time are you spending on this report? Is this report going to be done on time? No one cares in the freelance world. They want the thing on, like, at the time, right? No one cares that it took you 3 weeks to get it done. No one cares. They want that thing to be right. The reason they're hiring you is to give them valuable copy with the right words in the right order, delivered at the right time, and delivered on your deadline. That's what they're paying for. They're paying for that. That's why I think time is such a weird thing. Like I would never multiply by my internal hourly rate because it's almost always wrong. And people often make this mistake. And by people, I mean freelance writers. They make the mistake of they make the mistake of being like, oh, I'm just calculating for writing time, or I'm just calculating for this. No, you're doing 1,000 other things. You're compiling notes, you're compiling research, you're compiling this. Yeah, if I sat my butt down and just wrote a blog post from scratch without doing anything, like when I sit down to write a newsletter, right? I just sit down, like my weekly newsletter, I just sit down and write it, right? And if you get the free pricing guide, if you go to mandyellis.com/pricing guide, you can get my weekly newsletter. But when I sit down to write that, I'm just writing from my own knowledge and experience. I have a list of notes. I have a list of ideas, but I'm writing from my own experience. When we're writing for clients, we're most of the time not writing from our own experience. We need something to back up that says, like, this is what Pantone says, or the 5 colors of the year, or whatever. That's why I always think it's crazy when people say they sit down and it's less than an hour to finish a blog post, because I feel like they're not doing very good research. They're not double checking. Like they're not, that blog post is not filled with a ton of useful stuff. It's scannable. When you're writing these big beefy things that are actually more like reported pieces, and they need to be very persuasive, and they need to be very clear, and they need to do a lot of different functions, that's your Clydesdale. That's why you charge for value. That's why you need to think about the value. Nobody cares. If Carol goes to her client, or if I go to Carol's client, or if I go to my client and I tell them it took me 50% more time than I thought, they're not going to give me more money. And that would be crazy. That would be crazy. And I would never guess how long something is and then charge someone for that. That's totally inaccurate. But what I know is the value of those things. I know that that thing will live on for a long time. I know that it's valuable because they're going to make big piles of money off of it, like sales. I know that that thing is going to continue to bring them traffic. I know that that thing typically lives a year or 2 years or more. Like I have case studies that are like 5 years old that still live, right? And they're still getting sales and people from them, right? And I only got paid once. So the value of that thing really matters. And if I went back and said, oh, well, like the idea here too is that you would have to apply that backwards. So if you say, like, I think that this thing will only take me 3 hours, right? Or like it'll only take me 6 hours between all the stuff, and it actually only takes you 3 hours. Does that mean that you should go back to your client and charge them 50% less because based on your math, that's what the real answer is? No. Like, see, that's why I don't like that principle. I don't like the idea of guessing and then picking an internal hourly rate, because you could be wrong almost all the time. Like, I don't know anyone who has specific numbers that every time they write something, it's this amount of time. And it's not just the writing, it's all of the pieces. It's not just literally sitting down to write the article and edit it. There are lots of other things you have to do. And for me, I do a lot of complex assignments. That's what I do really well on. I do not do well with simple stuff. I tend to like overcomplicate it, get stuck in the weeds. So for me, when I do a lot of complicated stuff, that is a lot more valuable and it takes a lot more time. And I think that the time piece is not as important as writers really understanding the deep ripple effect of value of content. That is the most important thing. Okay, Carol, was that helpful? I'm glad that you asked that. So Carol says, I had an old client come back after 2 years with a per word rate. So this is timely. Yes, that's a bonus. When someone comes back to me with a per word rate, then I know we're on the same kind of field. When someone comes, this is what I've found oftentimes, is that a lot of clients who want to like nickel and dime are like, oh, well, if the article costs me $800, how much time does it take you? Then you're like, oh, it takes me this much time. And then they're like, why can't you do it faster? Or if you, like, this was the most crazy thing. If you write 100 words less, will it take less time and be cheaper? No, dude, no. Like, that's the thing is when you're getting in these conversations about time, most of the time, when you have a conversation about time, it's with someone who's trying to nickel and dime the actual time. They're not paying attention to the value of that content or how long it lives or all the good stuff that content will do for them, like the actual value. So instead of paying you $1,000, they want to pay you $800 because it took you 2 hours less time. Why? Why would I do that? That's crazy time. So this is the thing. And the other thing, Carol, because I know you're a rock star, Carol, and I've known you for a long time. So Carol and I were moderators together in the Den. So here's the deal. When someone comes to me with a per word rate, right? This is the coolest thing that's happened. And it's happened to me more than once, but it happened to me a little while ago. I was like, oh, well, I just decided to give them a per word rate because they asked. And normally I don't do that, but I did. I was like, oh yeah, normally I charge $1 a word for this content. They're like, oh, we pay $1.50 a word. And I'm like, oh shit, cool. Like, sounds good. I'll do that, right? Like that kind of, they understand the value of that content. They understand the long-term effect of that content. They're not asking me how much time it takes. I'm telling them I normally charge $1 a word. They're telling me they're going to give me $1.50. They don't care how much time it takes. They care that it's done right. Like, that's the thing that matters the most. So, just keep that in mind. Okay, Carol says, but the rate is lower than their agency used to pay me, but now there's no agency in the middle. That's weird. Try to get, you should be accepting the same rate as the agency and letting them know what that is. They may not know what the agency paid you. So you should be getting paid more or equal to what their agency used to pay me. Plus, didn't you say 2 years have gone by? So, like, it should be higher? You shouldn't be getting paid less. Carol, go back to them and tell them what you got paid at the agency and say, hey, this is what I was working at the agency and I'm happy to work at the same rate for you. Like, you shouldn't be getting paid less because they got rid of the agency. You should be getting paid the same that you were at the agency or more because the agency is not in the middle. So go back and futz around with that. Go do something about that. All right. I'm going to go to 4 because this is the last thing, and then we have a question, and then we're going to hop off. These are my last thoughts. So number 4 here. Number 4, we're going to talk about the back end. So this is how your per word pricing helps you raise your rates faster. Yeah, Carol, you should negotiate that for sure. And it's just just as a note, I know Carol already knows this, but you don't have to be scared about negotiating. It's just a conversation. You're just like, I would like this. And they're like, I would like that. And you're like, how do we compromise in the middle? Most of the time, reasonable people and green light clients are like, sounds good. It's not this thing, red light clients, it's a whole rigmarole. So if you start feeling like you're digging your own grave here with negotiating, that client's not for you. So 4 here. So when we're looking at per word pricing, now for me, when I look at hourly pricing, the idea, let's say you're charging $50 an hour and you're like, all right, I want to raise my rates. Well, how much would you raise it per hour? You're not going to double it most of the time. Most people aren't I'm going to go to $100 an hour. They're they go up by such small increments. They're like, okay, cool, $5 more an hour. But $5 more an hour or 10 or 20 more an hour is not as significant as 10 or 20 more cents per word. Okay? That I think is really important. So this is something that I have noticed with writers. I don't worry about hourly rate unless it's I'm consulting and I'm on a meeting. So if I do consultative stuff and I'm it's $200 an hour and we'll have a 2-hour meeting, whatever, that's a different game because it's not content. It's consulting and brainstorming. But I hear you, Woo. But here's the deal. If you raise your hourly rate, a lot of times it ends up being a very small bump, right? You're not actually getting that much more money. So if you're all right, I'm going to bump it by $20 an hour. So now instead of your work being whatever it was, now it's $60 more. So now you've made an extra $60. But if you raise your rate per word, you get paid a lot more, a lot more than $60. And this to me was a crazy idea. Why would I work hourly where I raise my rate, even if I raise my rate $25 an hour, and now this work now takes me an extra $75? What? No. The difference between charging 50 cents a word and 80 cents a word is vast. And your gaps there are a lot easier to kind of calculate and move up. For me, I always found that to be way more lucrative and way more useful than going up by $25 or $50 an hour. The increments of per hour are so small. So when you end up getting more, you really have to go from $100 an hour to $200 an hour, right? It's not to me, that's just the craziest thing. Even if you were $50 more an hour, let's say this thing is 3 hours, you now made 150 extra bucks instead of moving to a per word rate where you would make 500 extra bucks. I just think that it's just crazy to do that. I think it's nuts. I think it's way better to just calculate per word. And then when you move up, Every single time you type, you get paid more. And you get paid more because you now realize the value. It's not paid more because you're being wordy or you're taking more time. You're getting paid more because your writing is better. You're getting paid more because you complete things well. You know the value of your work. You know the value that you're giving your clients and how that affects them. You know that, this type of thing does XYZ to help them do whatever kind of things they want. So like, that when you write a blog post, that helps with SEO and web traffic and thought leadership. And I hear you, Woo, and all that stuff, right? So there's just a lot of things that I think the value pricing and knowing the value of your work is just way more valuable. Like there would be hardly any time where you would give a realistic hourly number, right? Like, let's say you were like, well, I know this thing takes me 8 hours, right? So if I'm getting paid $50 an hour, whatever that is, $400, is that right? 8 times 5 is 400. Whatever. So we'll just go with that. So 8 times like $50 an hour is $400. And now you're like, okay, now I want to get paid, $60 an hour. Well, 8 times 6 is 480. Now I've made 80 extra bucks. Okay. Well, now I'm going to make 70, like I'm going to do $80 an hour. So now I've made a significant jump, right? But I've gone up a lot. And for people to get on board with $80 an hour sometimes for writing is like, it blows their minds. I don't know why. But if you go to them and say this thing is $800 or $1,000, they're like, oh, sounds good. And this is a weird thing. And I think this is a weird human psychology thing, because when they see $80 an hour, they're like panicking. They're like, that sounds like a lot because I have no idea how many hours it takes you. And then you have to get in this weird discussion of like, well, sometimes it takes me 6 and sometimes it takes me 8, but then we should cap it at 10. And then we should, like, what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you did it per word and you said this thing costs $1,000, it doesn't matter how much time it takes you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the price for them, but it does focus on the thing that matters, which is the value of getting that thing, which is the content. That's the thing that matters. Carol says, yes, I'm really struggling to raise my hourly. Yeah, so that's why I think the hourly is not valuable. Like, it's the hourly thing when you tell, like, if you go to someone and say my hourly rate is $200 an hour, then immediate next question is, how long does it take you? That's not where we want to go. We want to go with, I want to work with you because I know that your content does XYZ, or I like your writing style, or I know that you have been prominent in this industry, or like they're hiring you for the value you're providing them. They're not hiring you for like when you clock in and clock out. That's dumb. Don't do that. So when you're thinking about hourly, like, I just don't think that's the way to go. Like, especially when someone comes to you with an inbound lead, like per word pricing allows you to calculate it out. And it allows you to kind of avoid the whole wordiness trap because you've already decided that 1,000 words is $1,000 or whatever you've agreed upon. I also have found that my students, like my freelance writer Wealth Lab students and my one-on-one students, go through the same thing. They get stressed out. Oh my God, I told them it would be 8 hours, or I told them it would be 4 hours. It's been 8 hours. I don't know if I should charge them double. We didn't agree on a max number of hours. Like, it becomes this very stressful thing. If you set it as a flat rate, you're not like going to the grocery store and being like, how long did it take to make this orange? Or like, how many hours did it take to make this vineyard, get right? Like, if you have a vineyard, it takes years, like 5 years for the vines to just like get to a point where you can make something, right? So you're not paying for 5 years of vineyard when you buy a $10 bottle of wine, right? You're not paying $100 for the bottle of wine because of the time it took all this stuff, right? The quality is what matters. So then you end up paying for a really, I hear you, Woo, but you gotta go. You gotta go, Woo. You can't, you gotta get out of here. You're bugging me. You're just wooing at me. So you're paying for the quality or the value of that thing, right? So like when you buy, no, Minnie, stop it. So when you buy a really expensive bottle of wine, right, you're paying for the value of that thing. You're paying for why it's that expensive, why the grapes are a certain variety. Shoosh, you gotta get out of here. Do you want to leave? Okay, hold on. We have to remove a friend. Nope. Why don't you just hang out outside? Minnie, bye-bye. Have a great day. All right. Sometimes you just gotta woo. You gotta woo princess in the room, and the woo princess in the room is driving you nuts. So with the wine, you're paying for the value of that thing which has been dictated by other people who understand the value of that wine, right? So there's a difference between, like, even if the amount of time it took, Charlotte, don't you woo at me outside the door. So let's say the $10 bottle of wine took 7 years, let's say it took 10 years to make that $10 bottle of wine. It took 10 years to make the $200 bottle of wine. Nobody cares. Nobody's at the store saying, well, the years matter. They're looking at the quality and the value. They're looking at the taste. They're looking at a whole bunch of different things. Nobody cares. So like for me, when I think about that kind of stuff, like if you go and you're like, how long did it take to make this orange? And this orange costs $2 or however much oranges are, like, or lemons. I usually know the price of lemons because I buy them a lot. So lemons are like 50 cents a lemon. Or corn is in stock right now. So corn is like 25 cents per cob. So you don't go to someone and say, man, your corn is 25 cents a cob, you know, why is it so cheap? Did it not take you a lot of time? Like, what? That's just crazy. Like the value of that thing, right? Like, and obviously grocery store prices and their value is dictated by a different thing. But I think that kind of illustrates the point, is like there are a lot of things in life that we never ask how many hours it took for that thing to make it to our table, or for that thing to exist, or whatever. We never ask about the hours. It's the value of that thing to our lives. So people who really care about wine buy more expensive wine because that thing has value to them and they understand the value of that fancy wine versus the $10 bottle of wine, right? Those things really matter. So like the idea that we're like worried about hourly, to me, is like a silly thing. I mean, yeah, hourly will work for consultative stuff, but for turning in a piece of content, a physical deliverable, like, you need to charge by value. That's the only way to get paid well for your work and to understand the value of the long-term effect of your content and really help you raise your rates faster. And you don't even have to worry about wordiness. It's not even a thing. Like, you don't even have to worry about that. So, okay, let's get to the question real quick. All right, so, okay, this is an interesting one. So, this came in for our live stream, and if you ever want to ask a question like this, all you have to do is go to mandyellis.com/question, and you can submit anonymously if you would like, or you can have your name up here, whatever you like. But if you go to mandyellis.com/question, you can submit a question like the one I'm going to answer right now, which is anonymous. So it says, let's say I found a company on LinkedIn and I found an employee that I'd like to offer my services to, but they're not active on LinkedIn or Facebook. For example, they liked something a month ago and that's it. What should I do? So for me, there's a big difference here. So I don't go on anything with Facebook. I just don't, that's too personal and weird. So on LinkedIn, what you want to do is find specific employees and then go from there. So it's not that it's just an employee. It's like you're looking for the content manager, the content marketing manager, the marketing manager, the marketing director, the VP of marketing. And if none of those people exist, the CEO. And the activity level only matters if someone has like 4 connections or 2 connections, or they don't have 500 connections, and you can see that they are not on LinkedIn. Like almost everybody has over 500 connections now because of all the COVID stuff and all the, you know, all the things getting changed and whatever. So the deal is that as you kind of look through, you're looking for the right person to send it to, not really their activity. And for me, when the only time I'm really checking activity is like if I notice that there's like 2 people I'm comparing, like 2 different marketing managers or 2 different people in content or whatever. And I'm saying like, okay, one of them has over 500 connections and it seems like, you know, they at least have updated their profile, and this person doesn't even have a picture on their profile and they only have, you know, 300 connections. I would connect with the person who looks like they're actually, you know, weeding out and taking care of their LinkedIn. That's the point when it matters. So when you're kind of going through all of these different profiles on LinkedIn, you're looking for the right person. It's not about like that they have posted something or liked something or commented on something. It's more about that you're getting your LOI, your letter of introduction, to the content marketing manager, the content manager, the marketing manager, the marketing director, the VP of marketing, the CEO, somebody who handles marketing or content within that company. And then if you end up at a company, like there's always companies with tons and tons of employees that you may send an LOI to, you're looking, like, if there's, like, this has happened to me before where there's like 4 or 5 people in content, or 4 or 5 people in marketing, or 10 or 20 people. Then you got to narrow it down by who's actually doing the content, because sometimes there's, 10 people who work in marketing, but only 2 of them do the actual content production. So then once you figure out who does the content production, my second tier after that is usually like, do they have LinkedIn Premium? Because if they have LinkedIn Premium, I can send them a message for free because I also have LinkedIn Premium. So that's a bonus. And I always pick the free message over anything else. Like, if I can send someone a free message and they're the right person, like, I choose that all the time. If they don't have premium and they're kind of a toss-up, I pay attention to who seems to be more active out of the 2. I just feel like that's your best bet. And worst case scenario, you can just forego the whole thing and use a tool like hunter.io to find their email. All you need is the URL of the website, and hunter.io pulls up the convention. So the email might be firstname@company.com, or it might be firstname.lastname@company.com, or last name first initial at company.com. But you'll at least know the convention of the email, and then you go find the right person and plug in their details, right? You find them on LinkedIn and say, okay, this person's name is, Alex Smith or whatever. You plug their details into the email thing, send your LOI as an email. So that's kind of your plan. It's just like, it's not really, LinkedIn, people can be super active and people can be not active at all, but they will answer messages. So the activity level isn't always an indicator on LinkedIn of whether or not someone will answer your message. Obviously, you want people to be more active on LinkedIn. But, when you're in a situation, you got to send it to the right person. And if you can't send it to the right person on LinkedIn for whatever reason, you can always find their email and email it to them instead. Okay, cool. I hope this has been helpful. And I hope that this has been something that is really useful for everybody. And so, last thoughts. So if you go get my free pricing guide, you go to mandyellis.com/pricing guide. That's where this question came from, that does per word pricing encourage wordiness? Someone got my free pricing guide and they sent me like, well, why is your pricing guide in per word rates, right? And that's because, and I hope that from this, this video, that you now see that that's really about value. We don't care about time. Like, this is when a lot of writers send me something and they're like, hey, how much time does it take you to do this? And I'm like, I don't know. I can give you a big estimate, but I don't know. And then they're like, well, how do I get done faster? And that's the wrong premise. Like, people start with the idea that if I get it done faster, or if I do this, I'll make more money. That's just not how it works. Some people have fastness as a skill, and you do get faster over time. Like, it just takes a while. But the goal is that you want to price for per word for value. And it really doesn't encourage wordiness because you've already agreed upon a word count. You've already set a contract. You've already set rules and a fence in place for where you should be writing for. So really, if you write more than your word count, you're just getting paid less, right? So I think that for me, per word is just the easiest way to calculate across the board for clients. You give them a per project price. And if you start doing hourly, you start making all these weird guesses, and then your client, like that, you don't want to have that conversation with them. You don't want to end up having a conversation with a client about like, how much time could it take you? Can you take less time? Like, that's not, the time is not the factor. The value of the content is. The conversations you should have with your clients should always be on the value of the content. No one cares about time. And if they care about time, they're caring about the wrong metric. Okay. All right, people. So I am actually not going to be here next Friday, but I have next week off. So we won't have a live stream next Friday, but I will send out in my email a bunch of videos that you guys can check out in the meantime. And we are here pretty much all the time, every single week at noon on Central Time on Fridays. Just putting it in there that I'm not going to be here next week. But I hope everybody has a really good July 4th. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Just remember to bring your dogs inside when it comes to fireworks. That July 4th is one of the weekends where a lot of dogs go missing because they get scared by the fireworks or they run away or whatever. So just remember, as someone who owns dogs who bark at the fireworks, we lock them in. So just a little note on that. All right. I hope everybody has a great weekend. And if you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you want to learn more about building a high earning freelance writing business, subscribe. and I will see you 2 Fridays from now. Bye.